November 2nd, 1943. Dawn breaks over Simpson Harbor, Rabaul. The largest Japanese naval and air base in the South Pacific sits, fortified and seemingly impregnable on the eastern tip of New Britain Island. 5 airfields, 2 harbors capable of sheltering the entire combined fleet, underground tunnels housing supplies, ammunition, hospitals, over 100,000 Japanese troops and laborers, more anti-aircraft guns concentrated in one place than anywhere else in the Pacific Theater. This fortress has anchored Japanese operations in the South Pacific for nearly 2 years. From Rabaul, Japanese forces threatened Australia, contested Guadalcanal, and controlled the vital sea lanes of the Bismarck Sea. Allied planners once considered Rabaul so formidable that invasion would cost 100,000 casualties. But on this morning, the sky fills with a sound the Japanese defenders have never heard at this intensity: the thunder of hundreds of Allied aircraft converging on the fortress from multiple directions simultaneously. What follows over the next 3 weeks will be one of the Pacific War's most devastating air campaigns. A systematic destruction that renders Rabaul impotent without a single Allied soldier setting foot ashore. A demonstration of air power so overwhelming that it rewrites the strategic playbook for the Pacific War. This is the story of how Allied air forces neutralized Japan's Gibraltar of the Pacific and proved that fortresses built to repel invasion could be destroyed from above. To understand the bombing campaign, we must first understand what Rabaul represented. Located on the northeastern tip of New Britain in the Bismarck Archipelago, Rabaul possessed one of the finest natural harbors in the Pacific. Simpson Harbor and Blanche Bay could shelter dozens of capital ships protected by surrounding mountains. The terrain provided natural concealment and defensive positions. The Japanese captured Rabaul from a small Australian garrison on January 23, 1942, just weeks after Pearl Harbor. They immediately recognized its strategic value. Rabaul sat at the intersection of vital South Pacific sea lanes, positioned to threaten Australia, support operations in the Solomons, and serve as the linchpin of Japan's defensive perimeter. Within months, the Japanese transformed Rabaul into a fortress without parallel in the Pacific Theater. They constructed 5 airfields: Lakanai Airfield Asterisk on the harbor's edge, Vunacano Airfield to the south, Rapopo Airfield further inland, Tobra Airfield to the north, Keravat Airfield, serving as a backup facility. These airfields could collectively support over 300 aircraft. Dispersal areas, revetments, and hardened shelters protected planes from air attack. Underground storage facilities housed fuel and ammunition. The defenses were extraordinary. Over 700 anti-aircraft guns of various calibers ringed the harbors and airfields. Searchlight batteries illuminated night attackers. Fire control radar directed gunfire. The concentration of anti-aircraft firepower exceeded even that protecting Tokyo. Underground, the Japanese excavated an elaborate tunnel system. Hospitals, supply depots, command centers, troop barracks, all buried deep in volcanic rock, immune to aerial bombardment. Some tunnels extended hundreds of yards into mountainsides. By mid-1943, Rabaul's garrison exceeded 100,000 men, troops, sailors, airmen, and construction laborers. The combined fleet used the harbor as a forward base. Hundreds of aircraft staged through Rabaul on their way to combat operations. From this fortress, Japan prosecuted its South Pacific campaign. Rabaul-based aircraft struck Guadalcanal. Ships sortied from Simpson Harbor to contest Allied advances. Reinforcements flowed through Rabaul to threatened outposts. But by November 1943, the strategic situation has shifted dramatically. Guadalcanal has fallen. Allied forces advance through the Solomons. MacArthur's forces push along New Guinea's northern coast. Rabaul, once the spearpoint of Japanese advance, becomes increasingly isolated, a powerful fortress whose strategic value diminishes as the front lines move beyond its reach. Allied planners face a crucial decision: invade Rabaul at enormous cost or find another way to neutralize this fortress. Admiral William Bull Halsey and General Douglas MacArthur choose a revolutionary approach: bypass Rabaul, isolate it, and destroy its usefulness through sustained air attack. Don't take the fortress, make it irrelevant. But first, they must break its power. The Allied air forces assembling to strike Rabaul represent an unprecedented concentration of power in the Pacific theater. From the south, Admiral Halsey's South Pacific Command contributes carrier-based aircraft. Task Force 38, built around the carriers Saratoga and Princeton, takes position southeast of Rabaul. This represents a calculated risk. Japanese shore-based aircraft at Rabaul outnumber the carrier planes. But Halsey believes the element of surprise and coordinated tactics will offset the numerical disadvantage. From the west, General George Kenney's 5th Air Force brings land-based bombers and fighters, B-24 Liberators, B-25 Mitchell medium bombers, and P-38 Lightning fighters staged from newly captured airfields in New Guinea and the Solomons. The Australian Royal Air Force contributes Beaufighters, heavily armed twin-engine fighters perfect for anti-shipping strikes and ground attack. This combined force represents something new in Pacific warfare: genuine coordination between Navy and Army air forces, between American and Australian units, between carrier-based and land-based aviation. The bureaucratic obstacles to such coordination are enormous: different commands, different operational doctrines, inter-service rivalries. But the imperative to neutralize Rabaul overrides institutional barriers. Intelligence preparation is meticulous. Reconnaissance aircraft photograph Rabaul repeatedly, cataloging defenses, mapping airfields, identifying targets. Photo interpreters count aircraft in revetments, track ship movements in the harbor, plot anti-aircraft positions. The plan calls for overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Phase 1: Asterisk suppression of enemy air defenses. Strike Japanese aircraft on the ground before they can intercept. Destroy as many anti-aircraft positions as possible. Phase 2: Asterisk shipping strikes. Destroy vessels in Simpson Harbor, warships, transports, supply ships. Cut Rabaul's sea communications. Phase 3: Asterisk infrastructure destruction. Crater runways. Destroy repair facilities. Target fuel storage. Make the airfields unusable. Phase 4: asterisk sustained pressure. Continue strikes to prevent repairs, maintain constant pressure, give the Japanese no respite to recover. The timing is crucial. November 1943 represents a window of opportunity. Allied forces have advanced close enough to bring Rabaul within range, but not so close that the fortress can threaten rear areas. The weather, always a factor in the tropical Pacific, shows favorable patterns. Most importantly, Japanese naval strength at Rabaul is at a temporary peak. A powerful cruiser force has recently arrived to support operations in Bougainville. If Allied forces can catch these warships in port, the destruction would be strategically devastating. November 2nd, 1943, is selected as D-Day for Operation Cartwheel, the campaign to neutralize Rabaul. The aircrews receive their briefing. Many are veterans of desperate battles over Guadalcanal, experienced in combat, but sobered by the losses they've witnessed. They know Rabaul's reputation. They've heard the stories of its massive defenses. Some calculate their survival odds and write final letters home. The morning of November 2nd, 1943, arrives with typical tropical weather: scattered clouds, good visibility, perfect conditions for what's about to unfold. At 900 hours, carrier aircraft launch from Task Force 38. 97 aircraft, F-6F Hellcat fighters, TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, and SBD Dauntless dive bombers, form up and head northwest toward Rabaul, 230 miles distant. The attack achieves complete tactical surprise. Japanese radar detects incoming aircraft, but assumes they're expected reinforcements. No alert is sounded. Fighters remain on the ground. Anti-aircraft crews go about routine duties. At 9:50 hours, the first wave hits like a thunderbolt. Hellcat fighters sweep in first, strafing aircraft parked on Lakanai Airfield. Japanese fighters scramble desperately, but they're caught at their most vulnerable moment, taking off. climbing for altitude, unable to defend effectively. In the swirling dogfight that develops, American pilots demonstrate the superiority of their new tactics and aircraft. The Hellcat, designed specifically to counter the Zero, proves itself in this crucible. While fighters clash overhead, Avengers and Dauntlesses press attacks on shipping in Simpson Harbor. The harbor is crowded with vessels, cruisers, destroyers, transports, supply ships. The attackers face a wall of anti-aircraft fire that turns the sky black with shell bursts. Aircraft shudder from near misses. Some go down in flames, but the attacks succeed. Torpedoes streak across the water. Bombs fall toward anchored ships. Explosions erupt across the harbor. The heavy cruiser Maya takes a torpedo hit that floods engineering spaces. The light cruiser Agano suffers bomb damage. Several destroyers are hit. A transport loaded with ammunition explodes catastrophically, the blast wave capsizing nearby small craft. The entire raid lasts 45 minutes. By 10:35 hours, surviving aircraft are heading back to the carriers. Behind them, Simpson Harbor burns. Aircraft wreckage litters Lacanai's runway. The fortress has been bloodied. Japanese commanders reel from the shock. This wasn't a probe or harassing raid, it was a full-scale assault. Mori concerning, where did carrier aircraft come from? The nearest American carriers should be hundreds of miles away. Admiral Sentaro Omori, commanding the cruiser force at Rabaul, makes a fateful decision. His ships have been damaged but remain operational. Rather than risk further air attack, he orders an immediate sortie. That night, under cover of darkness, the cruiser force flees Simpson Harbor, heading northeast toward Truk. This is exactly what Halsey hoped to achieve, drive the Japanese fleet from Rabaul, eliminating it as a naval threat. But there's no time to celebrate. The bombing campaign is just beginning. 3 days later, General Kenny's 5th Air Force delivers its contribution to Rabaul's destruction. November 5th, 1943, dawns clear over New Guinea. At forward airfields around Dobajura and Port Moresby, ground crews complete final preparations on over 120 B-25 Mitchell medium bombers and accompanying P-38 Lightning fighters. The B-25s have been specially modified for low-altitude attack. Nose armament has been increased. Some carry 8.50 caliber machine guns in the nose. This devastating forward firepower transforms the Mitchell into a gunship capable of shredding anything in front of it. At 700 hours, the Armada takes off, flying in elements that gradually converge. Over 100 bombers and 80 fighters head toward Rabaul. The formation flies low, just above the waves, to avoid radar detection until the last possible moment. At 9:45 hours, they arrive. The attack unfolds with choreographed precision. P-38s sweep in first, engaging Japanese fighters scrambling to intercept. The Lightnings use their superior speed and altitude to control the air battle, drawing Japanese fighters away from the bombers. Then the Mitchells roar in at masthead height, so low their propellers nearly touch the waves. They come in waves, one group after another, giving defenders no respite. The targets are shipping remaining in Simpson Harbor and the airfields. The B-25s employ skip bombing, releasing bombs at extremely low altitude to skip across the water like stones, striking ships at the waterline. The technique proves devastatingly effective. Bombs skip across the harbor, slamming into hulls, blasting holes below waterlines. The transport Kiyosumi Maru explodes and sinks within minutes. The destroyer Naganami takes multiple hits and has to be beached to prevent sinking. Several cargo vessels go down. The harbor becomes a chaos of burning ships, swimming sailors, and continuing air attacks. Meanwhile, other B-25s strafe the airfields with their heavy nose armament. Aircraft in revetments are shredded. Fuel dumps explode. Runway surfaces are pockmarked with bombs. Repair crews that run out to patch damage are caught in the open by strafing attacks. Japanese anti-aircraft fire is intense but less effective than during the November 2nd raid. The extreme low-altitude approach reduces the time AA gunners have to track and engage targets. The Mitchells flash across the harbor and airfields too fast for heavy guns to track effectively. By 1100 hours, the attack is over. The 5th Air Force formation heads home, several aircraft trailing smoke, some damaged but most intact. Behind them, Rabaul reels from this second massive blow. Simpson Harbor looks like a junkyard. Aircraft litter Lacanau and Vanakano airfields in burning wreckage. Repair crews work frantically to restore even minimal operational capability. But there's no rest. That same afternoon, more carrier aircraft arrive for another strike. The pattern is being established. Repeated attacks that give defenders no time to recover, no chance to repair damage, constant pressure that grinds down effectiveness. Over the following 3 weeks, the bombing campaign intensifies into a systematic program of destruction. November 11th brings another massive raid. Over 180 aircraft strike Rabaul in coordinated waves. This attack particularly targets the airfields, cratering runways and destroying infrastructure. The goal isn't just to damage runways that can be repaired quickly. The goal is to destroy the ability to repair, wreck the equipment, kill the specialized personnel, burn the supplies needed for repairs. The Japanese fight back desperately. Fighter pilots fly sortie after sortie, landing, refueling, rearming, and immediately taking off again. Anti-aircraft gunners man their positions through repeated raids despite mounting casualties. Damage control parties work frantically between attacks, but the mathematics are inexorable. The Allies can replace losses. They have training pipelines producing new pilots, factories producing new aircraft, supply lines bringing forward fuel and ammunition. The Japanese at Rabaul have only what they started with, and every raid depletes their resources. Japanese aircraft strength at Rabaul tells the story. October 1943. Over 300 aircraft operational. November 15, 1943. Approximately 150 operational. November 30, 1943. Fewer than 50 operational aircraft remain. The decline isn't just from air combat losses. Aircraft are destroyed on the ground. More critically, the logistics system breaks down. Fuel becomes scarce. Spare parts run out. Maintenance becomes impossible without proper facilities and tools. November 25, 1943, marks a significant escalation. For the first time, B-24 Liberator heavy bombers join the campaign, striking from high altitude. While less accurate than low-level attacks, the B-24s can carry heavier bomb loads and operate beyond the reach of most anti-aircraft fire. The pattern of attacks becomes predictable yet unstoppable. Morning raids by carrier aircraft. Midday strikes by 5th Air Force. Afternoon harassment by Australian Beaufighters. Night raids by individual aircraft keeping defenders from sleeping. The pressure never stops. Japanese commanders plead for reinforcements. The response from truck is sympathetic but limited. Replacement aircraft are sent, but they're shot down during the flight to Rabaul or destroyed on the ground shortly after arrival. Sending reinforcements to Rabaul becomes tantamount to throwing them away. The toll on Japanese pilots is particularly severe. Unlike American forces with their system of rotating veteran pilots back to training commands, Japanese pilots fly until they're killed or badly wounded. The cream of Japanese naval aviation, pilots who fought at Pearl Harbor, who battled over the Coral Sea and Midway, die in increasing numbers over Rabaul. By late November, Japanese tactics shift from active defense to pure survival. Aircraft are dispersed into the jungle, camouflaged, hidden. Pilots are ordered to conserve their strength, to avoid combat unless absolutely necessary. The mighty fortress has been reduced to husbanding its dwindling resources. While the bombing campaign continues, its strategic effects ripple outward, fundamentally changing the Pacific War's trajectory. With Rabaul neutralized, Allied operations proceed with far less opposition. MacArthur's forces advance along New Guinea's coast, capturing strategic positions that bring them ever closer to the Philippines. Halsey's forces secure Bougainville, establishing airfields that keep Rabaul under constant pressure. Most significantly, Allied planners realize they can bypass Rabaul entirely. The original plan called for invasion, a massive amphibious assault that would cost tens of thousands of casualties. Now it becomes clear that invasion is unnecessary. Rabaul can simply be left to wither on the vine, its large garrison isolated and impotent. This realization revolutionizes Pacific strategy. Why assault every Japanese strongpoint when you can simply bypass them? Leap past fortified positions, seize weakly defended locations that are strategically more valuable, use air power to keep bypassed garrisons suppressed. This island-hopping strategy, refined and applied throughout 1944 and 1945, accelerates the Allied advance across the Pacific. Garrisons at Rabaul, Truk, and other fortified positions sit out the war's final years, their soldiers and sailors maintaining positions that have become strategically irrelevant. For the Japanese, Rabaul's neutralization is catastrophic. The fortress that absorbed enormous resources, that anchored the entire South Pacific defensive line, has been rendered useless without a single Allied soldier landing ashore. The psychological impact is profound. If Rabaul can fall to air power alone, what fortress is safe? The November 1943 bombing campaign also validates emerging air power doctrine. Strategic bombardment advocates have long argued that sufficient air power could decide campaigns without ground invasion. Rabaul provides a practical demonstration. The fortress withstood air attack, its underground facilities remain intact, its garrison survives. But it no longer functions as a base. Its airfields are unusable. Its harbor is too dangerous for major fleet operations. Mission accomplished without a single Allied infantry division committed. The bombing campaign's costs are significant for both sides, though dramatically different in nature. Allied losses over Rabaul in November 1943. Approximately 40 aircraft lost to all causes, around 150 aircrew killed, missing, or captured. Several aircraft carriers sustained minor damage from Japanese counterstrikes. Numerous aircraft returned damaged, requiring extensive repairs. These losses, while painful, are sustainable and quickly replaced. Pilot training programs produce replacements. Factory production delivers new aircraft. The logistical system functions efficiently, keeping units supplied and operational. Japanese losses tell a darker story. Over 150 aircraft destroyed. Estimates vary. Some suggest even higher. Hundreds of irreplaceable veteran pilots killed. Simpson Harbor rendered hazardous for major naval operations. All 5 airfields severely damaged. Constantly under attack. The logistics system disrupted. Fuel scarce. Ammunition limited. Supplies dwindling, morale plummeting. As the perception of invincibility crumbles, more significant than the numbers is the strategic reality. Rabaul, which consumed enormous resources to fortify and garrison, has become a liability. The 100,000 troops stationed there serve no offensive purpose. They simply sit, consuming food and supplies, isolated from the war's decisive theaters. In 1944, as the bombing campaign continues at a reduced but sustained level, Rabaul's effectiveness approaches zero. Occasional aircraft still operate from the base, but they're nuisance raiders rather than strategic threats. The harbor sits largely empty except for wrecked shipping. The fortress has become a prison for its own garrison, not held by Allied troops, but isolated just as effectively by Allied air power and advancing Allied positions. The troops at Rabaul will remain there until August 1945, when Japan's surrender finally ends their vigil. The November 1943 bombing campaign against Rabaul teaches lessons that resonate far beyond the South Pacific. First, air power, properly applied, can neutralize even the most formidable fortifications. The fortress concept, developed over centuries of warfare, becomes obsolete when fortresses cannot defend against attack from above. Second, bypassing strong points can be more effective than assaulting them. Why fight for Rabaul when you can simply move around it, rendering it strategically irrelevant? This lesson shapes Pacific strategy and influences military thinking for decades. Third, sustained pressure matters more than single devastating strikes. One massive raid inflicts damage, but allows recovery. Repeated attacks that never let up prevent repairs, drain morale, and ultimately break combat effectiveness. Fourth, asterisk coordination between services and allied forces multiplies effectiveness. Navy carriers and Army bombers, American and Australian units, working in concert achieve results impossible for any single force. Fifth, the defender's advantage diminishes when air power controls the skies. Rabaul's formidable defenses, underground facilities, anti-aircraft guns, dispersed airfields, prove inadequate against sustained air assault. These lessons inform strategic bombing campaigns in Europe, guide island hopping in the Pacific, and influence air power doctrine into the jet age. For the Japanese at Rabaul, November 1943 marks the beginning of the end. The fortress that once threatened Australia becomes an isolated backwater. The airfields that once supported hundreds of aircraft become cratered moonscapes under constant attack. The harbour that sheltered the combined fleet becomes a graveyard of sunken ships. When the war ends in August 1945, Rabaul's garrison surrenders, having spent nearly 2 years isolated and impotent. A powerful garrison that never fought the battle it was built for because Allied strategy made that battle unnecessary. Today, Simpson Harbour is peaceful. Rabaul's airfields are largely abandoned or used for civilian purposes. Coral growth covers the wrecks in the harbour. The tunnels remain dark and largely unexplored. The volcanic mountains that once sheltered Japan's mightiest South Pacific fortress now overlook a quiet tropical town. But in November 1943, those skies thundered with the sound of hundreds of aircraft, and the fortress below shook under their bombs. Those 3 weeks demonstrated that even the mightiest fortress becomes a prison when air power controls the skies above it. The thunder over Rabaul was the sound of air power coming of age, and the old concepts of fortifications and sieges becoming relics of military history.